Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Kelly sat behind the bar of a nightclub and involuntarily recalled the theory that human life was a series of black and white stripes. Couch psychologists often said that life is a zebra, and if a person is on a black stripe, one should not despair because there is a bright future ahead. Others recommended jokingly, of course, to stock up on white paint and correct the situation to your taste. But Kelly was not comforted by this advice, but irritated because no brightness in the series of troubles she did not see and did not foresee in the future. On the contrary, the problems fell on her head as if from the horn of plenty. I have a feeling that in my past life, I destroyed people and cute kittens in a cruel way. Complained to Kelly, Betty's best friend, for keeping her company that night. Why else would I be in such misery? After all, the only light that awaits me will be at the end of the tunnel. Betty, though she'd grown accustomed to her friend's dark humor over the past month, still twitched at such statements. The girl immediately grabbed Kelly by the arm and began to assure her that she should not think in such a way. Thoughts are material. Betty was angry, looking into her friend's eyes. You have to think good thoughts, positive thoughts, okay? For the universe to hear you, by the way, the universe is very sensitive to words, requests, and thoughts. It always responds to powerful energy charges. You have to follow your thoughts and words. Many things will come true. Betty was a girl obsessed with esotericism, horoscopes, mantras, and affirmations. She chose guys according to her zodiac sign and started the day at the mirror, praising herself, so to speak, energizing herself for success. Kelly was her antipode. All her life, Kelly has been a pay girl, the pride of her parents and teachers. She graduated from school with a gold medal and got a budget place in advertising and public relations. She graduated, of course, with a red diploma. After graduation, Kelly married Jacob, whom she met in her first year of university. Immediately after the wedding, she found a job in her major. For 3 years after graduation, Kelly held the position of chief editor at an image agency. The experience was interesting, extremely diverse. Among the customers in the agency were large medical centers and car services and shopping centers. She mainly wrote texts for corporate newspapers and magazines, the purpose of which was to raise the company's image to unprecedented heights. She communicated with the owners of various companies and customers, went to meetings, conferences, events to cover them in a favorable light. In general, very organically blended into this world. Kelly loved her job. However, the pay was criminally low. Her boss weighed on the girl all the work, but the salary did not increase. She constantly convinced Kelly that they were critically short of money. However, managed to fly several times a year on vacation to prestigious resorts. Kelly, with her excellent student syndrome, swallowed her boss's explanations for a long time and patiently shook the noodles from her ears. So it lasted until last month. Then the girl accidentally saw on the site vacancy PR manager in a large agency, Mirage, and quickly responded to it. Mirage was a young, but suddenly grew advertising agency, which was always on the rumor. Then they participated in a sponsorship program, then in a charity event, then created new projects in the field of media and info business. Among the clients of the firm glimpsed famous brands, stars, and influential people of the country. Trying to get into the company was a brave decision, but who doesn't take risks will sit in a stuffy office while her boss warms his bones in the Seychelles. So the girl dialed the coveted number, and she was assigned the date of the interview, and at the right hour she was already at the coveted door. Our boss loves young and creative people, and always gives them a chance, even if they don't have much experience, but you have a lot of it. I'm sure he'll appreciate your candidacy. He's away right now and will be back in a month, but will reply by email. Kelly was informed by the hiring manager, Clara. True, he himself, demon incarnate, so be prepared for anything if you get hired. The pay is great, but the demands are high, and there is absolutely no tolerance in the chief. He hates tardiness, delayed projects, any excuses, yes, a lot of things he doesn't like. He's a very difficult man, although he's incredibly handsome. He just doesn't look at anyone. I don't know, maybe he's one of those guys. You know, the Blue Oyster Bar. The girl pouted her lips resentfully. It was obvious that she had already tried to make a move on the boss, but it didn't work out, and it hurt her very much. It should be given credit. The manager was extremely spectacular and shapely blonde. Her not modest cleavage showed everyone a wide sole of size 3, and plump lips glistened with pink gloss. So Kelly involuntarily thought that few men would pass by such a doll. However, neither the orientation of her boss nor the relationship with the team, the girl was not interested. She was attracted only by the work. And yes, the girl got it. A week later, the mysterious boss demon approved her candidacy. The girl waved goodbye to her boss with a handkerchief and flew away to a new place of work. They tried to keep her, even promised manna heavenly, but Kelly did not believe. To Kelly's amazement, she was welcomed at the Mirage with open arms. Surprised by her track record of projects and a pile of magazines that came out from under the pen of the girl, she liked the team. True, the boss was frightened, like naughty children, Babeka. Now and then you could hear giggling and wailing at the water cooler or in the ladies' room. When our Charles comes back, we'll see what you'll do. Although I know I'll be looking for a new job. He's not gonna leave anyone for the good looks. Kelly worked at the Mirage for almost a month. It seemed to her that a new stage in her life had begun, a beautiful and happy one. However, it was a trip to the doctor's office that turned everything upside down. Kelly just felt sick, but she was a paranoid person after losing both parents, so she immediately ran to the nearest private clinic. There she was given a disappointing diagnosis, and the doctor's verdict was like a thunderclap. Unfortunately, the diagnosis is rare, and the treatment is complex and difficult. However, I have no guarantee of recovery, he told the patient, but we'll do everything we can. I have a great doctor, trust us. What if there's no treatment? Kelly asked then, looking only at the trash can that stood in the doctor's office, because she was afraid that she would get sick from such news, and she would spit out all her breakfast. The doctor was surprised by her question and shook his head. No treatment? He repeated with annoyance. Then I give you 6 months, a year. 6 months, Kelly echoed thoughtfully. However, Kelly, not being a jealous scandalizer, believed Jacob, who swore that there was nothing between him and Cindy. As it turned out, her naivete played tricks on her again. How long have you been friends with her? Kelly asked, looking at the mountain of wrinkled clothes that her husband had stuffed into his suitcase. Be honest, Jacob. For a while. The husband gritted his teeth. Kelly nodded and then went into the kitchen to make herself some tea. She waited until the front door closed behind her unfaithful spouse before throwing the still full cup against the wall. Then she looked at the light brown stain on the wallpaper, shifted her gaze to the shards of her favorite mug, and wept bitterly. Kelly sat down on the floor, wrapped her arms around her knees, and let her sobs fall. It seemed to her that her life had been shattered just like that cup, in one moment into many sharp shards, and if she clutched one in her hands, it would penetrate her skin and leave a wound. Kelly lived like that for another week. She took a sick day at work, even though she knew the risks, because she was on probation. However, she couldn't find the strength to take a shower, let alone smile at her coworkers or generate creative ideas. All this path led Kelly to the nightclub Platinum. To be more precise, Betty had dragged her there, having made her friend take a bath and put on makeup beforehand. She'd even picked out her outfit. The scarlet strapless dress looked expensive and spectacular on the brunette. Betty claimed that loud music, a good dose of booze, and a club atmosphere would bring Kelly to her senses. She was right. But it wasn't the strobe lights and music from the speakers that shook Kelly up. It was the man. The brunette sat down at the bar at around 1 o'clock in the morning and ordered a whiskey on the rocks from the bartender. He found himself sitting across from his girlfriends. Kelly cast a brief glance at him, unwittingly noticing that the stranger was incredibly handsome. Sharp cheekbones, dark, thick hair, tall with a fashionable haircut, dressed in a dark gray jacket, shirt, and jeans that didn't hide but only emphasized the difference between his broad shoulders and narrow waist. Betty noticed the young man as well. She immediately leaned closer to her friend. "Who let the cover guy in here? I'm willing to bet my favorite delusional purse, for the sake of buying one I haven't eaten in almost a month, that behind all those layers of clothing is hidden the perfect athletic triangle packed with all kinds of muscle." Hot on one exhale, whispered Betty to her friend, "God, the universe heard you, but instead of old Depp, it brought Apollo down from heaven, dressed in expensive clothes." Kelly snorted into her glass with laughter. She was drinking at that moment, and what caused the cocktail to spill back through the tube and gurgle in the glass? "Oh shit!" Still chuckling, Kelly wiped her lips, setting the glass aside. Oddly enough, it was this embarrassing episode that caught the stranger's eye. He barely raised his eyebrows and his lips twitched into a smile when he noticed the brunette. Kelly hurriedly turned away, continuing to chat with her friend about distracting topics. However, the man so caught the girl's eye that her thoughts kept returning to his person. After a while, Kelly couldn't stand it and furtively threw another glance at him. What she didn't expect to see was that the stranger was also looking in her direction. Noticing that their gazes had crossed, he gave the girl a charming smile. Kelly suddenly felt a wave of embarrassment. She was completely confused under the gaze of the light gray eyes. "Is he looking at you?" Betty asked, and then squealed in delight, answering her own question. "He's looking at you. Look, you've got to go up to him." "What?" Kelly asked, her eyes widening in fright. "Are you crazy? You're the one who's crazy if you're planning on blowing this chance." "The universe. If you say one more word about the universe, I'll put an end to our long friendship and die alone." Kelly grumbled. "Exactly. You got the verdict that you have nothing left to enjoy." The blonde fluttered her arms excitedly. "Were you having fun at all again? Did you do anything wild? Skydiving, maybe? Danced at a carnival? Hitchhiked to some country? No. So why don't you at least flirt with this handsome guy? What if you spend the night with him? A stranger?" Kelly marveled. "Yes," raised her voice. "Yeah, why not? What's stopping you? I remind you that your jerk Jacob left you in the most difficult period of life. He went to his, just a girlfriend." When she said that last sentence, her friend comically changed her voice to a man's and whispered, mimicking Jacob, "That's no reason to throw yourself at the first man you meet." Kelly grumbled, hiding a smile. "Well, I'm sorry, my favorite, but you don't have a lot of time to go over it. You know I wouldn't miss my chance. If he was looking at me, I'd have walked off into the sunset with him by now. so run off to meet your Johnny Depp. My friend insisted. I'm not going out to meet him, okay? I've never been to a club, but I've seen a lot of documentaries about it, parried the girl with knowledge. Kelly, Betty tried to stop her friend, and her eyes widened, which Kelly didn't notice. And none of them ended in a wedding, you know. Usually these personalities turn out to be maniacs. Put something in my glass now, and tomorrow you'll find my name in the criminal record, and I want to live the rest of my life, however short. Kelly, again the girl tried to interrupt her friend, pulling her by the arm. Stop it. Kelly, however, a little tipsy, continued her tirade. It's rude to stare at strangers, by the way. She muttered, shaking the contents of the glass with a pipe, which loosened her tongue and allowed her fantasy to play out, especially since he's insanely handsome. And you know what the problem is? He knows it. Guys like that are usually narcissistic, but empty. I bet he's the narcissist of legend, not Apollo. I can imagine us making love under the mirrored ceiling, and for 5 minutes he'd be staring at his reflection and the muscles in his back and arms rolling over and over. Oh my God! Betty groaned suddenly and choked with laughter, covering her flushed face with her hands. Kelly looked at her friend in surprise, not understanding her reaction. The joke was funny, but not to the point where her shoulders were shaking with internal laughter. She realized why her friend was having a nervous fit, however, when she heard a pleasant male voice behind her. I don't have a mirrored ceiling in my bedroom, but we could move the bed to the closet, so I could see my muscles better. I prefer gluteal muscles. I've been squatting with a barbell for a reason. Kelly was stunned, looking at her friend hiccuping with laughter. She didn't dare to turn at the voice. Meanwhile, laughter was clearly audible in the man's tone as he continued to respond to the accusations thrown at him. I swear I'm well-mannered enough not to look at people. It's just that right behind you was a bar mirror looking at myself, you know. Betty, unable to stand it, laughed. Kelly, on the other hand, blushed thickly to the tips of her ears. Stop mocking me, please. You see, I'm so ashamed, the girl mumbled. I really apologize. I'll forgive you if you let me buy you a drink and prove that I'm not a bad guy. So to speak, to debunk your stereotypes. You know, after your accusatory speech, it's already a matter of honor. The brunette replied. Kelly found the strength to turn around and look at the stranger. He was even more handsome up close. A clear lip line, a high, intelligent forehead, correct, masculine features. Wow, what time is it? Wow, it's late. Betty marveled out loud, staring at her empty wrist where there was no watch in sight. It's about time good girls like me went to bed. So you can take my place. Young man, I don't mind. Her name is Kelly. She likes sweet cocktails, and by the way, she's not usually this bad. It's just been a bad day. Betty slid off the high bar stool, making way for the brunette. She hung her purse on her shoulder and tried to get away, waving goodbye. What the hell are you doing? Kelly hissed, grabbing her friend's arm, holding her in place. I'm messing with your love life, but I don't know him at all. That's what dating is all about. Betty snapped back. Two strangers meet and get to know each other. Honestly, Kelly, I hope he gets to know you deeply enough tonight. Laughed her girlfriend, making Kelly blush again, noticing her friend's hesitation. Betty gave her a hug and whispered, I'll hang out here for now. Don't worry. If anything, text me and I'll pick you up. Okay. I'm begging you, at least try to shake things up. Maybe this person will just help you get your mind off. You know. Pulling away, the girl pecked her friend on the cheek, leaving a sticky lipstick trail. With one more glance at the brunette, Betty disappeared into the crowd of dancing people. Kelly let out a long sigh as she looked at the blonde, but then turned back to her new companion. "So, Kelly," the man smiled softly, "I swear I'm not a maniac. You know, any self-respecting maniac would say the same thing." Kelly parried, still feeling very uncomfortable after her embarrassment. "Fair enough," nodded the man. Kelly felt tense at first. After all, she had recently been abandoned by the husband she had loved all her conscious life. He'd left her meanly, so she didn't want to trust men. But whether it was the cocktails or the charming brunette was such a great conversationalist, she relaxed very quickly. Soon Kelly was laughing at his jokes. Moreover, his smiles and laughter made her cheekbones droop, and her abs began to ache. She was sure that another hour, and she would leave the club with relief cubes. It turned out that the young people were on the same wavelength. They easily found common topics, had many similar interests, both in the professional sphere and in their personal lives. The man a couple of times invited Kelly to dance, both slow and fast. The girl was simply delighted, because her new acquaintance turned out to be a great dancer and skillfully led her. Her body literally followed the man's movements. They moved in a single rhythm as if they were practicing. An hour and a half later, when Kelly received a text message from her friend that she would like to go home, the girl realized that she did not want to leave the club. She liked the company of a stranger. She texted Betty that she would stay a little longer. In response, she received a lot of smiley faces, in the form of salutes and a couple more. She was too embarrassed to recognize the meaning of them. At this time, a couple more drinks appeared on the bar, generously portioned, refreshing ice. To introductions, the man said, tapping his glass against Kelly's. "Wait, what's your name?" Kelly asked, before she had a chance to sip her drink. At this question, she even stirred. The rest of her consciousness, which seemed to drift on the waves of alcohol and euphoria of acquaintance, was horrified. She'd been talking to a man for an hour already. One could say she'd fallen in love with him, and she hadn't even bothered to learn his name. "Charles." The man introduced himself with a smile, stirring the ice in his glass and making it clink against the glass walls. "Oh, that's my boss's name, Charles, but at work they call him." She lowered her voice to a whisper and put her palm to her mouth, as if she didn't want to share such confidential information with the rest of the club. "You know the rhyme." The girl pulled away, laughed, but then blinked fearfully, realizing that she had just insulted a man. "Oh, you're not offended, are you?" "It's not about the name. It's about the person who bears it." She justified herself. "I think my boss is called that on merit. They say that he is wildly harmful, rarely appears in the office, because he is always traveling, but always finds someone to fire. Can you imagine?" "I only worked there for a little while, but I've already heard horror stories, and the girls call him that because they're offended, because he doesn't pay attention to them. You know, I'm a mean boss too." Charles grinned. "I don't like, for example, the laziness of my subordinates or lying. I don't like unwillingness to admit their mistakes and improve, unwillingness to take responsibility. I can't stand inappropriate criticism of other people's work, coupled with a lack of alternative ideas. Well, not many people like that." Kelly nodded approvingly. At that moment, a guy appeared behind her, eager to order from the bartender. He squeezed in next to Kelly and shoved her in the back. This caused the girl to lurch forward, falling into Charles' arms. "Oh!" she exhaled. Finding herself in a tight embrace, she smelled the brunette's perfume, tart with notes of wood. "Oh, sorry." The guy apologized. "It's okay." The girl smiled awkwardly, nodding at him and pulling away from Charles. Her hand remained in his palm, though. She didn't want to take it away, and the man was in no hurry to open his fingers. Instead, Charles looked into her eyes. His fingers gently stroked the back of Kelly's hand. She wanted to ask Charles something else, like what company he was an executive at, or at least what perfume he wore, or did Charles know that his gray eyes were like morning mist and silver? Just all thoughts flashed out of her mind. Kelly remembered again how boring her life had been, so the girl took a breath as if she meant to dive into the icy water, and then leaned forward, touching her lips to the man's. He froze for a moment, not expecting it, but then responded to the kiss. Sparks raced through Kelly's body, and lava seemed to flow through her veins instead of blood. Butterflies erupted in the girl's stomach that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Charles's lips swallowed a quiet moan that Kelly hadn't expected from herself. She hadn't expected to kiss a man in a nightclub, in front of the others. As if mindful of the audience, she broke the kiss, whispering directly into Charles' lips, "Can we get out of here?" The man's eyes darkened and his breathing hitched. The chemical reaction that happened between them subdued both of them. He nodded, unable to answer, taking Kelly's hand. Charles helped her down from the chair. Forgetting their drinks, they walked out of the club. Kelly rubbed her eyes, but still didn't dare open them. Her whole body ached and her head felt heavy. "Good morning," she heard a man's voice. At that moment, she sharply remembered where and with whom she was. She opened her eyes and saw a man beside her. "Good morning," she mumbled back, and blushing, she coughed. Charles smiled, pulling the naked girl to him. She snuggled against his chest, a pleasant sensation of warmth and closeness spreading through her body. The night had been an extravaganza. Kelly, a little tipsy, didn't remember everything, but what she did remember made her blood boil anew. Kelly laughed into Charles' neck, thinking that she had something to brag about to Betty, and her girlfriend was probably hungry for details. "Not disappointed?" Charles asked suddenly. "Disappointed in what?" Kelly looked up. "Well, there are no mirrors here." The man reminded her slyly, looking at the brunette. She snorted and pinched his side weakly. "But you have a panoramic window. Maybe you like to be watched." She raised her eyebrows, nodding at the window. "I love it. Pigeons, seagulls, butterflies." He nodded. "I love it." Charles lived in a luxurious neighborhood in a 2-story apartment. His bedroom was large but Spartan, with a huge bed, closet, and bedside tables. The window was adorable, though, a full wall. Kelly thought it must be really nice out here in the rain. The sun was shining brightly in the sky now. The girl looked up at him and was startled. "What time is it?" she asked. "I have to go to work, but it's Sunday." "Think of another excuse to get away from me." The man smiled. "No, of course not. I don't have to work until tomorrow." Kelly explained, rolling off the bed and looking for her clothes. "But I have a project I need to finish right away. My boss, the evil one, is flying in tomorrow." "I told you. I don't want to be out of work so soon. I really like it. Besides, I took the whole week off, which he doesn't like either. I guess he doesn't like anything at all, except the tears of his employees." Grumbling at her boss, Kelly began to pack her things. She found her underwear, but she couldn't remember where she'd taken off her red dress. She only hoped it had been in the hallway and not in a cab. "I don't want to believe that your boss is that unpleasant," the man remarked. With his hands behind his back, he watched Kelly gather with amusement. The girl shrugged her thin shoulders, trying to finger her hair. "I can't draw conclusions until I've met him in person," she remarked reasonably. "However, rumors about this person do not dispose to pleasant communication. I'm afraid of him in advance, you know." Kelly said the name of the boss in a low voice, as if tasting it. "You don't know him, by the way?" She turned over her shoulder, catching the brunette almost choking on a restrained laugh. "I've heard of him." Charles nodded. He threw back the blanket and stood up smoothly, like a predator, approaching the girl. She looked at him suspiciously. "Did you hear that?" Kelly clarified. He nodded affirmatively again. "I'm well acquainted with him, Kelly, and now you are too. Why don't you draw your own conclusions?" It took Kelly a while for Charles' words to sink in. Then she gasped and recoiled. "No," the girl exclaimed, first pale and then blushing. "No. During the night you only said yes and yes. You turned to me a couple of times, Vlord." Charles remarked, "I like that better." Kelly swallowed and covered her breasts, though it was no use. "This is a nightmare," the girl whispered. "I slept with my boss, I'm fired." "That's usually how you get promoted, not fired." Charles remarked. It was obvious that the situation made him laugh, and Kelly's reaction was hilarious. Kelly herself was in shock. "It's not funny." She shook her head worriedly. "You're not kidding?" "Tell me you're kidding. I can show you my passport. And I wasn't hiding where I work. I thought you understood." Charles shrugged. Kelly took a deep breath, then exhaled. She'd been euphoric yesterday. Of course she hadn't realized that their jobs were so similar. How much had she told him about her co-workers and her boss? Kelly staggered toward the exit. "Now I really have to go. We can have breakfast, then I'd call a cab if you're in a hurry?" Charles began, no longer smiling but frowning. "Look, don't take everything so personally, okay? I liked you. I thought you liked me too. I'm not as much of a jerk as they say, seriously. I'm just strict, and I take my job seriously, because I started this company myself from scratch. I hate the fact that some people treat my life's work with the sleeves up. It's a shame if they see it as some kind of aggression." Kelly didn't hear his words anymore. She nodded strangely, and then turned on her heels and hurried downstairs. She found the dress next to the stairs. "Kelly, wait!" The man tried to stop her. Only the girl did not want to wait. She hastily pulled on the dress, grabbed her shoes, and jumped out of the apartment barefoot. She was ashamed, wildly ashamed. She devoted the rest of the weekend to remembering what she had talked to Charles about. She realized with horror that she had been too frank. On Monday, Kelly came to work with her head down low. She hadn't done the project, but she'd brought a letter of resignation. "Why are you looking so glum, Kelly?" asked her coworker Mason. "Have you seen your boss yet? Did he show up?" She looked up. "Yeah, the first one. He's sitting in his office, pissed off. I haven't seen him that grumpy in a long time, and neither have you." Kelly swallowed nervously, tucking her dark curls behind her ears. She sighed resolutely and walked toward Charles' office. Knocking and hearing come in, she stepped inside. Charles sat in the supervisor's chair, in a halo of morning light. Kelly slid her gaze over the man, ignoring the butterflies in her stomach. "Charles," Kelly muttered. "Hello. I brought this." "Anyway here." The girl put a resignation letter on the boss's desk. "What's this?" He looked at the paper with an unpleasant gaze. "A letter of resignation. I can't work." "What are you, a child, Kelly?" Charles bristled. "Do you want me to tear it up, or do you want it out of my sight?" Kelly opened her mouth and glared at her boss. "You're not letting me quit." "Is there a reason?" He raised his eyebrows. "Besides the fact that I've seen you naked?" "Well, you know." Kelly hissed, suddenly forgetting that she was shy. Charles, on the other hand, suddenly smiled, and his gaze grew warmer. "I like you better with that look on your face." Approvingly, he nodded, before taking the application and crumpling it up and tossing it into the recycling garbage can. Kelly nodded, but then her shoulders slumped again. "Look, this was a mistake. I can't work with you. And I'm not sure I want to spend time working right now," she said. "What do you mean?" The girl looked into the gray, attentive eyes and decided to give him the whole truth. She realized that after that he would turn away from her, though maybe he would give her a bonus out of pity. "I don't have much time left, is what I mean," Kelly declared. Then she just spilled her guts about the doctor's appointment, about her decision, about her husband running away. "You see, Charles, I'm not like that. I don't throw myself into bed with strangers, honestly. It's just that you caught me at a difficult moment." She tried to explain herself, sitting across from her boss. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you right away, but talking about the fact that I have only a few days left somehow spoils the romance. And I just wanted to relax, exhale, forget about who I was, what was happening to me. Honestly, at least for a short time, but I succeeded. I guess that's why the news that you, my boss, knocked me off my feet. It was just fate laughing at me, constantly tripping me up. I wanted to do something that was out of character for me. And what did it lead to? Even the man I liked so much, to whom I opened up, turned out to be a boss. That's nonsense." Kelly shook her head, as if marveling at her own words. She didn't even think about what she was saying, just used Charles's silence as a shoulder to cry on. He listened attentively, not interrupting her, and looked at her intently, as if he were looking into her soul. When Kelly was silent, he asked softly, "So you really liked me, didn't you?" The girl flared up. "That's not what I meant." "Stop! What are you talking about? I told you I was dying and going through a divorce, and that's all you heard? You're a narcissist after all." She snorted with a touch of irony. Charles smiled. "I just heard that the girl I liked me at first sight. And from there on, it's all a blur," he reported, causing Kelly to stare at his fingernails in embarrassment. "I don't understand. Are you kidding?" Or the girl even squinted her eyes, gazing into the man's face. She remembered very well how her husband, with whom she had lived together for so many years, had run away with his heels blazing. Then why was this man, let's be honest, a complete stranger to her, as calm as a Chinese god? Then Kelly thought that was the answer to her question. She's nothing to him, so he has no worries. For some reason this thought pricked the girl in the area of the heart, a sharp and thin needle. It became unpleasant. Charles, unaware of the thoughts of the brunette sitting across from him, hurried to explain himself to her. "Kelly, it will take me a while to digest all the information that you just poured on my head," honestly admitted the boss. "However, I want to say once again that none of what you've said has convinced me to sign my resignation letter or to forget that I had a good time with you. And anyway, didn't you say you wanted to try something different for yourself, get out of your comfort zone, tickle your nerves? How about an office romance with the boss?" Charles winked cheerfully at her. Kelly smiled shyly, shaking her head. She slowly, as if reluctantly, took her eyes off the man's handsome face. She looked around the office she was in for the first time. On one of the gray brick walls hung several busy and bright vintage posters with retro advertisements. In another corner was a shelf with a vinyl record player. The girl remembered that Charles liked retro. He loved history and was very fond of traveling. She thought she would like to get to know him better, but she also thought that it was as if she knew him. It was like meeting old and close friends, people who were close to one another, 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 people who were close to one another. Charles turned out to be the same. These reflections both comforted and saddened the girl. She did not want to think about the future, to connect her life with new relationships and feelings, because she already knew that a happy ending in her story is not provided. I'll give you a penny for your thoughts. Charles broke the silence, using the old British ideology. The girl looked at him sincerely and openly. I wouldn't want to be in a relationship. At the nightclub, I thought I'd run away from you in the morning like Cinderella from her prince. She confessed. That would be my daring adventure, a flash of passion with a stranger, like in the movies. And revenge on my ex-husband, I guess. It's nice to hear that I've been made into an instrument of revenge. Charles grumbled. His eyes, however, shone with slyness. Well then, I offer you friendship. How would you like that? The girl bit her lip for a brief moment, but then nodded hesitantly. I'd like a friend like you. Well, that's settled. Charles clapped his hands together. We're best friends from now on. Oh, don't say that, Betty, okay? Kelly laughed. My friend who was at the club last night will scratch your eyes out, but she won't give up her best friend status. Charles smiled softly at Kelly, looking into her face. The look in his gray eyes made butterflies flutter in her stomach again, tickling her delicate wings. She realized that being friends with this man was going to be a challenge. Then I'm going to work, she asked uncertainly. Charles nodded, then added in a pseudo-businesslike tone, I'm waiting for your design for the clothing brand, Mrs. Kelly. And don't forget that at 1 o'clock we have lunch at my favorite cafe. I'll pick you up, don't you mind? Kelly giggled, feeling like a girl, and shook her head. How can I say no to my scary and evil boss? The girl asked playfully, standing up from her seat. Charles, dissatisfied either with her answer or with his reputation. I'll take away your bonus. He lazily dropped the threat, returning to the papers he had been sitting on before she arrived. Kelly smiled broadly and walked out of the office. She leaned her back against the wooden door and covered her eyes, still smiling. There was a warmth and a strange anticipation in her soul, like in childhood, on the eve of the holidays, when a child falls asleep in nervous, but so pleasant excitement, expecting magic, gifts under the tree from Santa, or a birthday cake with candles that will surely fulfill all his wishes. Kelly hadn't experienced that pleasant feeling in a very long time. It had been gone from her life long before the doctor's diagnosis. She'd just gotten bogged down in routine, like travelers getting stuck in quicksand. Their relationship with Jacob had lost its spark a long time ago. The man did not try to please his wife. There were no surprises, no romance. All this seems to have remained in the first years of university, and then overgrown with everyday life. So now Kelly's blood began to boil again, and in her chest, as if flowers were blooming, the first spring flowers that broke through the icy soil. She seemed to think, for the first time, that everything would be all right. If only now, if only this second, but it would be. As the door closed behind Kelly, a smile slowly slid off Charles' face. He grudgingly set the papers aside, put his elbows on the desk, and rested his face in his palms, wiping away the fatigue that had built up. The insomnia of the last few days had taken its toll, and then there was Kelly. He didn't bother reminding the girl of what had happened between them the night before. No, not the bed scenes or the hot whispers. Those moments were fresh in her mind, but he realized she had forgotten other things. The fact was that just before she fell asleep, Kelly had suddenly sobbed in his arms. Small, fragile, naked, she had shared her innermost feelings with the man. The confession was much like her story in his office today, but much more confusing, emotional, and moving. That night she had told him about what her husband had done to her, what the doctors had sentenced her to, and that she didn't want to live on pills, but wanted to breathe until the last minute. He wiped her tears when the girl admitted that she had never been to the country she dreamed of. She said she'd dreamed of a cruise ship tour all her life. I wanted to see whales, dolphins, or at least someone in their natural habitat. I really love the sea and the oceans. And one summer I read a book called Silver Bay by Giorgio Moyers, said the girl, resting her head on Charles's chest. After that, I dreamed I'd see whales sometime later. It's not like I didn't know I didn't have time. That night, Charles never fell asleep. He stared at Kelly's face in the moonlight, tousled her soft hair spread over his pillow, and thought a lot, and came to the conclusion that he didn't want to let her go, even though it was an extremely difficult decision for him. He himself lost a loved one, a fiancée who never became his wife. The misfortune happened 3 years ago. However, he could not throw the girl out of his heart, so he was distracted by work, with such diligence and zeal that he earned the reputation of an angry boss among employees. Of course, he was unwilling to look at other ladies after losing his beloved. There had been only flings in his life, minor and brief, and now there was Kelly. So funny, sincere, insanely beautiful, a girl whose heart had been so unceremoniously broken. The Charles Agency was famous for its charity work. In the man has always lived a certain thirst to help people, which only became stronger after the loss of his fiancée. But his desire to help Kelly he could not call philanthropy. It was deeper. It was as if Kelly had fallen into his heart back then, in the nightclub. Her delicate fingers had touched the strings of his soul that had long been silent. They began to play a melody again, and his heart began to give it a special rhythm. Charles did not want to give up so easily. He felt like he wanted to be there, like it was the most right thing in the world, like he had been waiting for this meeting with Kelly. The man looked out the window at the grayish sky with sparse clouds. One of them looked like a hare with long ears, and the rest were just cotton candy. He drummed his fingers on the table, trying to calm the excitement that hadn't let up in the last 24 hours. He realized he couldn't help the girl, but he wanted to try to make her life beautiful, the kind of life she dreamed of. Charles took his smartphone and, having found the necessary number in the directory, pressed the call button. "Adriana, hello," he began softly. "I'm interested in a cruise ship, and also, where in the world can you see whales?" The sky was gray and so low that it looked like it was about to fall into the waters surrounding the cruise ship. Kelly thought that the sky and the waters of the ocean reminded her of Charles's eyes. The man that had burst into her life suddenly at the most difficult moment and then simply turned her world upside down. He became the artist who had plenty of white paint to color her life. After that frank conversation, they really became friends. They talked a lot, went out a lot, went to movies and restaurants. Charles would invite her home and cook dinner himself. They talked about work and life, shared dreams and interests. Kelly began to look forward to each morning, just to see Charles, just to talk to him. She suddenly realized that every night when she went to sleep, she thought of Charles, and when she woke up, she thought of him. A month later, when Charles brought Kelly the cruise tickets, she was speechless. Of course, she thought it was crazy to take off to an unknown destination, to give up her life and her job. Betty, however, stated emphatically, "It would be crazy not to do it, Kelly. I will break our friendship if you refuse," she assured her friend. "You're going to regret it your whole life. And look at the way Charles is looking at you. I'd give my soul for just one look." We decided to remain friends. Kelly waved it off languidly and hesitantly, and Betty snorted, rolling her beautiful eyes up to the ceiling. Yeah, right? There's always so much tension between friends that it's scary to put a match to it. God forbid it all blow up. Yes, you are in love with each other, you fool. The girl declared in a categorical tone. But I can't do that to him. Kelly reminded her. He told me he lost his fiancée. Do you want him to lose another person? The smile on Betty's face faded, but she quickly pulled herself together. How about you don't decide for him what he should do? The girl suggested, crossing her arms over her chest. Of course, very soon they realized that remaining friends was a lost cause. An affair broke out between the young people before they even stepped on the deck of the ship. Charles even had to arrange to switch cabins. Their staterooms were in the luxury category, but they were separated. Now the lovers were not satisfied with this arrangement. They wanted to travel together, live in the same cabin, sleep at night in a double bed, or not sleep. It was a wonderful trip. Kelly woke up in Charles' arms every day and jokingly asked him to pinch her to make sure she was awake. He did so with pleasure, lightly pinching his girlfriend's thigh or side. It didn't hurt, but it was very ticklish, which made Kelly giggle. Then the tickling would turn to kissing, making the girl float above the clouds. On one of the days of the cruise, their liner, with the romantic name Call of the Ocean, was sailing north of Coronation Island. That's when the real miracle happened. Whales! Shouted one of those walking the deck at that moment. There are whales in God. There are so many of them. There must be so many of them. The passengers, among whom there were even zoologists, spilled out onto the deck with their eyes wide open, looking out into the vast waters. All the way to the horizon, at night they lay in their cabin. Charles was already breathing evenly, falling into sleep, but Kelly couldn't sleep a wink. She replayed and replayed in her mind the moment she had met the whales when she had first seen them. Then she thought about her confession to her boss. The words had been on her tongue for a long time, but she didn't think it was fair to say them, as if they were some kind of burden, an obligation. But Betty was right. It wasn't her place to decide for Charles what to do with her feelings, whether to accept or reject them. He'd given her too much already, and even if their fairy tale on the beach had ended, she wouldn't blame him. However, he had reciprocated her feelings, and now Kelly didn't know what to do. "Charles, are you asleep?" she asked softly in the night, not expecting an answer. Charles, however, did respond. "It's up to you, Princess," he murmured sleepily, touching her hair with his lips. "A word from you and I'll be cheerful. Just give me 5 minutes and a cup of coffee." Kelly smiled. Charles really did treat her like a princess. Protecting her, trying to fulfill her wishes, she was living a fairy tale. "I was thinking." She bit her lip, hesitant to voice the thought. "I thought that when we got back, I would go to the doctor again. You know, it's strange, but I feel so good. Every day makes me happy, and I'm getting better. I just don't believe in my disease. If it's really killing me, I wish. There's just so much I haven't seen in this world yet, that." She exhaled convulsively, trying to deal with the huge lump lodged in her throat. Somehow it was so hard for her to say the phrase, "I want to live." Charles, however, heard her and understood. The man's arms wrapped around his lover tighter, pulling her to him. "I didn't want to bring it up, Kelly, because it should be your choice," he began gently. "But I'm thinking about it more and more. Let's try it together, okay? You're not alone. I'll be there for you, no matter what happens." Kelly was relieved. She believed Charles because she felt safe in his arms. Next to Charles, she could allow herself the bold and daring thought that everything would be all right. However, she had no idea what was waiting for her. a black car pulled into the parking lot next to a private clinic. Kelly looked up at the beautiful building, its windows reflecting the sunlight. The last time she'd gone to a private clinic, she'd gone to one in her neighborhood, but the building didn't look as luxurious. Charles, however, had insisted on the best doctor in town. "Well, I'm off," the girl said with deliberate cheerfulness and leaned forward to kiss the driver on the cheek goodbye. Charles accepted the kiss, but looked at her in surprise. "Where are you going?" "Alone?" "No, I'm going with you." The man's voice sounded almost indignant. Charles' whole look said he was annoyed at Kelly's assumption that he would let her go alone to take the blows of fate. "But they won't let you in the office anyway," she shrugged, "and you still have things to do today. Like there's anything more important than your health, Kelly. Let's go. If they won't let me in, I'll wait for you in the hallway. Then you and I will go and have lunch or go for a walk, okay?" Charles unbuckled his seatbelt, intending to get out of the car, but Kelly froze in her seat as she watched the man get out. She still couldn't get used to the care, the sensitivity that this beautiful man gave her. Involuntarily, she compared Charles and Jacob again. She remembered that when she had gone to the hospital that unfortunate time, Jacob had not even called her after the doctor's appointment, although he knew that the girl had a bad heredity and her poor health was troubling her. She remembered vividly walking out of the clinic and crouching alone through the city with rain drizzling from the sky. She remembered being devastated, but not finding the strength to call someone. Her phone was silent until Betty got off work and called her friend to check on her doctor's appointment. Jacob hadn't even called her since their breakup, just to see if she was still alive. Kelly only came to her senses when there was a knock on the window, and then the car door swung open and Charles gallantly offered her his hand, smiling. "Here you go, lady." She smiled back at him, and as she put her small palm into his hand, she felt a wave of relief. Her fear of going to the doctor was beginning to let her go, for she was not worried about anything around Charles, and she was ready for any news. However, what the young people heard after the doctor's examination shocked them. The man made an ultrasound, looked at the results of tests and studies, which the girl had taken earlier and brought with her, then looked at Kelly with a strange expression on his face. "Excuse me, but who told you that it is time for you to choose a wooden raincoat?" inquired the doctor. "May I know the name of the hero?" Kelly was confused by the question and the form in which it was asked. Yes, she'd heard of medical humor, had even been shocked by surgeons' and pathologists' jokes a couple of times, but here she had an unpleasant feeling. Charles, who was allowed into the office, didn't like the question either. He sat in a nearby chair and moved forward, intending to ask the doctor to choose his own tone of voice. But Kelly squeezed his fingers just in time and blurted out, "A doctor from a private clinic," said the girl and wrinkled her forehead, remembering his last name. "Benjamin Braun, the clinic Healthy You. It is located on the outskirts." "Why?" The doctor hummed and shook his head, waving the papers. "So." He stretched out, not hiding his amusement. Everything became much clearer. Without explaining his behavior, the specialist typed something on the keyboard of his laptop, then turned it toward Kelly and Charles. "Here, look at your doctor," he offered, showing them an article from a local news portal. "Benjamin Braun, the con man who was arrested, is already serving his sentence. He took bribes, sold free medicines, and most often bribed people into useless treatments, scaring them with horrible fatal diagnoses. I'm surprised the news has gotten away from you, Kelly. We've had it on every channel recently, and every radio station has been talking about this bastard. But we were out of town. We went whale watching." The girl mumbled confusedly, and her eyes slid over the lines of the article, studying the details of the case. The picture was indeed of the very doctor Kelly had gone to see. The face of a man who promises you death in a year is extremely hard to forget. The doctor, at that time, when he heard that Kelly had gone whale watching, squinted suspiciously, as if wondering if she should see a therapist at the same time. Then he remembered how much her man had paid for a session to get them in as a matter of urgency, and decided that whales might well exist in the world of these people. Wait! Charles broke into the conversation, and his voice was extremely tense. What does all this mean for us? He lied to Kelly, am I right? It's she. Is she okay? It was only at that second that Kelly realized what the doctor was getting at. It was as if she had never imagined such an outcome and had never allowed anything like this into her head. Now she was frozen, the blood rushing to her face and her pulse pounding in her temples. She clutched her companion's hand again, so that her nails dug into his skin, leaving a trail of thin holes, but neither of them even noticed it. The doctor smiled. It was obvious how pleased he was to bring good news. He nodded happily. I'm not even going to ask you for a follow-up exam, Kelly, because you're perfectly healthy. Everything the previous doctor told you, though what kind of doctor is he, is an embarrassment to our profession. The man frowned for a moment and continued. In general, all his words and diagnosis were lies. He just hoped that you would become one of his victims, that he would get more money out of you. He had a pattern. He was in cahoots with other doctors. They were punished, too. They performed all the procedures in their clinic, and then said that with great labor and God's help, pulled the man from the other world. So his reputation was initially high. Fortunately, that story is over. It's a good thing you didn't agree to be treated by him. Kelly looked away from the doctor's face, staring at the laptop, then at the desk. She couldn't see anything else in front of her, though. Feelings stirred in her chest, jostling, one giving way to the other. Shock, amazement, joy, fear that this was another mistake, disbelief, but a strong desire to believe. I don't believe it. The girl shook her head. Charles lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles, which brought her to her senses a little. The girl turned to him and noticed the sincere delight in his gray eyes. It was no longer fog, no longer an overcast sky with leaden clouds, but a gleam of silver that slipped the onyx of his glasses. It wasn't until she noticed the smile on the man's face, and the fact that there was a suspicious glint of tears in his eyes, that the girl realized it was all real. It was true, happening to her. I love you, said Charles, instead of all the other words of joy, in spite of the doctor's presence. And I love you, Kelly echoed, feeling tears running down her face again. She had been crying a lot lately, but only out of happiness. Looking into the face of the man she loved, Kelly inadvertently thought that her little failed death had been worth it to meet her true love. Charles proposed to Kelly almost as soon as they learned the happy news. It was at that moment that the girl realized she was still not divorced. Yes, she called Jacob her ex-husband, had not seen him for a year, but officially they were together. So the girl quickly filed the necessary divorce papers. Later, Betty joked that by doing so, the girl called her ex, as witches call demons at spiritualistic seances. Jacob first appeared on the doorstep of her apartment, but not finding the mistress there, he came to the office. He was surprised to see Kelly. The girl was not dying, as he thought. On the contrary, she had blossomed. Love and a wonderful vacation had helped her to become even more beautiful than she was. The girl's eyes shone, a natural blush played on her cheeks, which was much more beautiful than any cosmetics. She was beautiful and stylishly dressed. Kelly, Jacob muttered, looking at her in surprise. I got the divorce papers, came over to talk. Shouldn't have bothered really. Kelly shook her head, not the least bit embarrassed by their meeting, for nothing even stirred in her soul. Everything can be done online now. Can you imagine how convenient that is? Jacob hesitated, stepping from foot to foot. He looked around the office where Kelly was working, then again, as if hypnotized, stared at the girl with greed. This letter of happiness was a surprise to me. He confessed. Really? Kelly raised her eyebrows. It was a surprise to me, and an unfortunate one, that we hadn't finalized the divorce sooner. Now we have to wait until it's legalized. I'm surprised you didn't think of that, you being in a new relationship and all. How did Cindy put up with you being married? Or does she only like other people's men? Kelly leaned back in her chair and flirted with her pen, glancing at Jacob, who looked a little shabby and pathetic at this point. Maybe he'd always been like that, though. Kelly just didn't notice the flaws in the people closest to him. She hadn't even noticed the mistress. Jacob grimaced and sat down in the chair across from Kelly. He picked up the statue Kelly had bought on the cruise when they'd stopped at the port, twirled it around, set it back down, only then confessed. Things aren't going so well with Cindy. My business is in trouble, you know, that's why I'm here. How are we gonna divide the assets? It's just that I was hoping to get a mortgage on the apartment, and Kelly felt a rush of nausea as she realized the hidden meaning behind his words. Wait, Jacob. She stopped him, putting her hand palm forward as if signaling a stop. You mean you were waiting for me to stop treading ground and leave our apartment to you? Is that what you mean? Jacob shrank back at first, squared his head in his shoulders, then remembered that he was a man after all and straightened up. Don't you think that makes sense, Kelly? Tell me about your plans, suddenly the girl asked, leaning forward and resting her chin on her crossed fingers. I'm very curious. Are you planning to sell the apartment and invest in business, or live in it with your secretary, who is only your girlfriend? That's not funny. Jacob got angry, raising his voice. You have no idea what I'm going through right now. I invested in the wrong business, you know. I listened to that fool, hoping to make a profit. Now I got a lot of debt and a big problem with the IRS, and if I don't pay it off, they might even put a case on me. Cindy, on the other hand, she ran off with some asshole, barely had the IRS knocking on our door with charges. I'm just in some kind of hole. Do you realize how hard this is for me? Kelly's face didn't change. The accusation and exclamation of her ex-husband didn't hurt her. She was even surprised at her reaction. It turned out that Charles had taken up all the space in her heart and soul, taking her ex-husband out of it, along with his belongings. There was not even a drop of feeling for Jacob left there. She had no sympathy either, but Betty would probably say that the man was just caught up in karma. Kelly sighed, settling back into her original position. I see. Anyway, I wish you wouldn't take too long to sign our divorce papers. This play has gone on long enough as it is. You'll get half of the assets. By the way, as I recall, a business created during the marriage is also split in half. True, I do not need your debts, so you take your own company. Consider it a gesture of my goodwill. In a businesslike tone, said the girl, as if making a deal with a client. However, the apartment was inherited from my parents. It's not a jointly acquired property, so don't get your hopes up. Okay, why don't you just handle things on your own sometime? I've been dragging you along for too long already. Jacob shook his head and stepped forward. Are you serious, Kelly? Tell me, why do you want this apartment? You have no one but me. We've been through so much together. Well, do you want to? His gaze ran down her face nervously and quickly. Do you want me to come back to you? I'd nurse you. I'd carry you. You know, it was with Cindy that I realized how much I loved you. I made a mistake. This time the feeling of nausea in Kelly's throat became even more distinct. Her eyes narrowed, her gaze became stern. Unfortunately, I have some bad news for you, Jacob. The girl retorted sharply, I will live. I don't know how long, maybe a year, maybe 10 years, or maybe I'll live to be 100 years old. What? Jacob got sick, but you said. Kelly jerked her shoulder with an irritated frown. The doctor was a con artist. It's a long story, and I don't want to retell it. But wait, then we can have it all back, right? Jacob suddenly perked up. You and me together, just like old times. You always found a way to solve every problem, Kelly. I really appreciated that. This is going to be problematic. Kelly shook her head. My fiancé will be against it. You're what? Jacob jerked back as if he'd been spit in the face. Kelly turned the picture frame toward him. There, in a brightly colored picture, were Charles and Kelly. They were standing on the forward deck of a cruise ship. In the distance, the ocean was silver, and there were whales. That's why I'm asking you to hurry up. Kelly explained calmly, we want to get married. To be honest, I'd forgotten I was still married. I only remembered when Charles proposed. Wait, are you kidding? Jacob shook his head. Are you kidding me? And where was this photo taken anyway? And where did you find this one, Charles? Isn't that the name of your new boss? Kelly smiled broadly, nodding. It's nice that you remember something from my stories. Yes, that's him, Charles. I found him, as you say, off duty, but that's another long story, not for your ears. Jacob's face turned red, the color of a boiled tomato. You're having an affair with the boss? He jumped to his feet. Kelly suddenly laughed out loud. Is this coming from the man who left me for his secretary? She asked in a tone as if she could not believe that Jacob had brought up such a topic. You just tricked me. Jacob shouted even louder. You said you were sick, that you only had a year. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, Jacob. The girl splashed her hands. I didn't do it on purpose. Jacob was shaken by the news. He looked then at the photos of happy couples in love, in brightly colored life jackets, then at the same satisfied face of his wife, with whom he had not yet had time to divorce. She was too beautiful at that moment, and Kelly had a kind of strength and self-confidence that he had never noticed before. It all made him angry and infuriated him. Kelly continued as if nothing had happened, glancing at her watch. Look, you come to my work, taking up my time with useless talk. The divorce will be in any case. If you want a scandal, then let's have one. I'm just not sure you can handle another lawsuit with the IRS on your ass. As to that apartment you wanted, I don't need it. I don't live there now. But you're not getting it, Jacob. I'm not a charity. Jacob gritted his teeth and moved forward, resting his palms on the PR manager's chair. Did you grow teeth this year? Or what? Become a bitch like your arrogant girlfriend? Kelly paused for a second, then got up from her seat as well. She looked arrogantly at the man she loved, it turned out, in a past life. I've always had sharp teeth. It's just that unlike you, I didn't sink them into the throats of the people closest to me. I fought on their side. I was always on your side, Jacob. You didn't appreciate my loyalty. You turned your back on me at a terrible time, ran away, tail between your legs, jumped into the first bed you could find. So you just don't dare come back into my life now and make some kind of claim. You're pathetic and disgusting. Get out. Jacob jerked as if Kelly had slapped him in the face. His face was flaming and his head was throbbing. It felt like it was going to explode like a ripe watermelon. Without another word, Jacob turned around to leave. At that moment, the door opened and Charles, the head of the Mirage agency in a business suit, appeared on the threshold. He gave his fiancée's guest and employee a surprised look, but quickly recognized his face, though it was now twisted with anger. "Jacob, right?" the man asked, trying to hide the contempt he felt for the man. "I'm sorry, I won't shake hands. Personal prejudice. Are you here to sign the divorce papers?" Jacob gave Charles a quick, angry look. "The fiancé? Well, congratulations, happily ever after. But tell me, how does it feel to pick up another man's woman, so to speak, to finish the stump?" He asked mockingly, with venom in his voice. "I have no idea." Charles replied calmly, "I've never had affairs with other people's women. When I met Kelly, she was single. They say some asshole dumped her when he found out she was sick. There are such moral assholes, aren't there?" Charles winked at a pale Jacob. After a moment, however, the contrived cheerfulness and calmness faded from Charles's face. "Now I suggest you leave the room before my patience runs out. Believe me, I'm trying very hard not to throw you out." Jacob felt with his skin that the man was not joking. He silently backed away, sidestepped out of the office. Kelly walked over to her man, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I'm sorry about that. I didn't know he'd think of coming here," she said timidly. "What an unpleasant man, and how did you live with him?" "I'm itching to hit him," said Charles grudgingly. "Why don't we go after him?" "Don't get dirty." Kelly shook her head and snuggled up to the man. He kissed her forehead, hugging her around the waist. "I'm here, by the way." Got a reply from a jewelry brand. They want the full package. "You're a smart girl." He praised the employee. "I'm lucky to have you in every way. Good thing I threw away your resignation letter." Kelly smiled broadly at her future husband, whom she loved with all her heart and, moreover, knew it was mutual. Over the past year, she had realized something else important. After a while, it might turn out that the streak of life that seemed black was actually a runway. After all, Kelly had really taken off, and she wasn't going to stop for a minute in the great flow of happiness.